One of the big things that happened in Austin this week is that the House and the Senate both released their baseline budgets, and that's where they basically will start the budgeting process for the session. The big news in that is the fact that we are actually $3.7 billion short on maintaining the current level of services in the state budget. What that means is that either one, the House and the Senate will have to agree to dip into the rainy day fund, which is up to about $9 billion at this point, or they're going to have to require state agencies to cut their budgets to make up the $3.7 billion shortfall. What's happened is basically, and I don't think it's a surprise to anyone, is that the franchise tax, which is the main business tax in Texas, is not generating the amount of revenue for the property tax cuts that it was projected to bring in. Sales tax revenues have slowed, and of course oil prices are down, and what that means is that the state's not collecting as much severance tax. So that's what's created the shortfall situation. What it means for agriculture is that we were hoping to get some additional monies for boll weevil eradication, feral hog control, perhaps even fever tick, and the ability of us to get those funds obviously is now in doubt. In fact, we may actually be trying to make sure that agriculture programs aren't cut if the legislature decides not to dip into the rainy day fund.
The big news this week is Governor Perry had a press conference where he talked about reforming eminent domain. We're very welcome to hear that. In fact, he was talking about public use, putting that in the Constitution, which is good to go on and really solidify that. And he also talked about good faith negotiations, which is another thing that we really need in eminent domain reform. However, he didn't say anything about compensation or compensation provisions, and we think that's part and parcel to what we need for eminent domain reform to make it meaningful to property owners. Right now, property owners lose part of their property and they lose value because they have diminished access, say, they're not paid for it. We think they really should be paid for all their damages if they lose their property. So we hope we can work with the governor. In fact, we're already working with other legislators to put this provision in different bills, and we're hoping we can get some great eminent domain reform legislation passed this session that'll really help protect property owners.
Representative Leibowitz has already introduced legislation that would repeal the Trans-Texas Corridor statutes as they exist today. The department a few weeks ago announced a shift of the concept, a shift of the overall project. So Representative Leibowitz has already taken the first step in order to make that happen. However, he's also filed legislation that would change, modify the Texas Transportation Commission. He's thinking about having a law passed that would create a 15-member commission, all elected from around the state, the creation of 14 different regions that would be represented, elected on their own, plus one at-large member. And it would be 2-year terms staggered. So that's a different bill that's already been introduced that's specifically dealing with the Transportation Commission. Representative McClendon and Representative Zerwas have both introduced legislation that would completely abolish the Transportation Commission as it exists today. Instead, it would create a one-person commissioner elected statutorily statewide to be the head of the transportation agenda for our state. One of the biggest things that the Farm Bureau is concerned about are the segment and advisory committees that are established through TxDOT on the road construction projects around the state. Senator Corona has filed legislation that specifically addresses the advisory authority establishment of these committees. Farm Bureau wants to be sure that in law, landowners are stipulated as mandatory members of these advisory and segment committees. On another front, another area that I cover for the Farm Bureau is education. There's been legislation introduced by Senator Ellis that would transfer the authority and the functions carried out by the State Board of Education and transfer all of that over to the Texas Education Agency. So as that progresses and as dialogue continues, the Farm Bureau is concerned just to see where all of that is going to fall into place. So we're monitoring that as well. And lastly, on the economic development front, Representative Miller has introduced legislation that would create the Texas Rural Job Development Fund. This would be a grant program administered by the Office of Rural and County Affairs that would allow our rural counties, our rural communities around the state to take advantage of additional funds that could potentially be allocated. And it would be administered by ORCA, which would directly affect most of our members. So the Farm Bureau is going to stay involved with that as well.
The Prescribed Burn Board is up for sunset review this session, and during the interim there's been hearings on it. Prescribed burn is a tool that land managers, ranchers especially, use to control some of the other growth on their property that they would prefer not to have, like mesquite and weeds. It helps to improve the quality of the grass and the forage that they do have on their properties. Farm Bureau has been supportive of using Prescribed Burn in the past. We're supportive of continuing the Prescribed Burn Board, which provides some rules and some procedures that allow people to become prescribed burn masters. You can use their services on your property, and it helps to control some of your liability issues in case unfortunate event that a fire gets out of hand on your property. The sunset review has been informative. We do see that there's still some challenges out there facing prescribed burn and its usage. As a matter of fact, there's even been a bill introduced in the last 2 weeks that would do away with the Prescribed Burn Board and the tool that it offers. Of course, we will oppose that bill, and I feel confident that we will be able to continue the use of prescribed burns on our properties. It's just whether or not we're able to improve that and enhance it will be the real challenge. Also under sunset review this time is the Texas Agriculture Finance Authority, the part of the Department of Agriculture that operates the Young Farmer and Rancher Loan Guarantee Program. It's something that our policy has supported for several years. Our Young Farmer and Rancher Committee has worked with the Department of Agriculture in the past and has reviewed the materials they're looking at again this session and trying to come up with ways to make sure that that program is as useful and beneficial to young farmers and ranchers as it can be.